This is an Erhu, and it turns out that this Erhu classic all the way from 1976 has a very similar story as that of Undyne from the game Undertale. With that in mind, what happens if we put these two pieces together? How musically universal is that sense of heroism and adventure? Let's find out. Alright, so to start off, the 1976 Erhu piece I'm talking about is "战马奔腾," which roughly translates to Charging Cavalry, and for Undertale, I'm specifically talking about Undyne's Spear of Justice theme. Now, wait just a minute. Before I even try to hypothetically combine these two pieces, why do I think they can go together in the first place? Charging Cavalry is from 1976, and Undertale is from 2015. That's a 39-year difference. So before I move on, let me go ahead, take a few steps back, and start to explain the thing that really made me think of this project in the first place. The story of Charging Cavalry.
Going down. Going up.
Let's go ahead and set the scene for Charging Cavalry. While a lot of the stories told in Erhu classics fall in more of a civil category, this piece is an exception to that pattern and actually depicts a group of cavalrymen defending their homeland against a wave of invaders. Therefore, the music reflects this. Forget any sort of gentle, smooth introduction. We go straight into a string of confident, triumphant sounding notes with big accents followed by a crescendo before moving into the main majestic melody depicting the glory of battle. However, the story of Charging Cavalry can't be that majestic forever. Battle is, intense and stressful after all, so after this neat little war cry of a trill, the battle's begun, and with a quick key change, we have a tune of intense combat that ebbs and flows with dynamics. Let's switch back to the combining process and see how we can add this element of the story. So first things first, we gotta get the scores of these two pieces, and as an Erhuist, I personally like to compose in something called numerical music notation, where instead of the staff notes that you're probably familiar with, we actually use numbers. Let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so now that we have our two scores in a notation I like, we can finally get to combining them. Yeah, that was easier said than done. Two main obstacles came up as I combined these two pieces, those being time signature and key changes. Long story short, Spear of Justice has what seems to me like 3/4 time, which sounds like this, while Charging Cavalry has 4/4 and 2/4 time, which sound like this. In addition to that, it sounds like Spear of Justice has parts in F key, F sharp key, B key, and B flat key, while Charging Cavalry is in F key, G key, and B flat key. In other words, the keys are all over the place. What this meant was that if I just blindly smushed the two melodies together, things probably wouldn't end well. So if I wanted to combine or switch between the two melodies, I would either A, have to figure out a way to smoothly transition between all the time and key signatures, or compose a new version of each melody that uses the time signature and keys of the other, and then smush those two together. Turns out, it was all of the above. Yeah, that was a lot of work. So in the meantime, let's give my past self some time to work through all that and see what's next for Charging Cavalry. Alright, so we were in the midst of some super intense battle. Sometimes it's sneaky, and other times your cover is blown. And when that time comes, you charge. A quick key change, and we get a tune of no longer super fast-paced action, but more of a heroic pride and camaraderie. We even have some bouncing bow here to simulate the hoof-pounding cadence of the horses. Eventually, that unifying pride and camaraderie swells, getting more and more intense until the sounds of battle literally take over the music. And I'm not exaggerating when I say literally. This part of the piece literally tells me to play using a bow technique meant to simulate horse galloping. Literally. Whew. Okay, let's switch gears and take a look at how to add this into our fusion. So while it did start off difficult trying to make transitions between 2/4/4/4 and 3/4 time, I thankfully saved a bunch of time with composing the two melodies in different keys because I was composing in numerical music notation. To understand why this is a time saver at all in the first place, let's get away from this beast for a bit and look at Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Okay, so here are the first few notes of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in staff music. And here's that same part of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in numerical music notation. So yeah, numerical music notation is a bit easier to write by hand, but that isn't the thing that makes this notation system so cool. To show that, I'm actually going to time myself changing the key of this piece from C major to F major for each of these notation systems. Let's get started. And time. Alright, not too bad. I tried to save some time by only erasing the spots of the old notes. Okay, time for the numerical music notation version. And start. So, it's still a bit slow, but not too shabby of a time. In all seriousness though, this is why I love numerical music notation. Don't get me wrong, with the help of software, changing keys in staff music is a breeze, and if you're experienced enough with staff music, you can transpose in your head no problem. However, I'm lazy, and I like numbers, and it takes me too long to remember every good boy does fine. So by using numerical notation, I can see at a moment's glance that the melody is the same, just in a different key. And I can just redefine 1 to whatever I want without changing the whole look of the score. Oh, and also, if you're familiar with scale degrees, then that is essentially what the numbers in numerical notation are, just now without the notational middlemen of the letters A through G. Pretty cool. With this edge in notation, I was able to make slow but sure progress through combining the two pieces. One especially cool part was when I got to the galloping section of Charging Cavalry. I was able to overlay the melody of Spirit of Justice over the galloping in the background. It has the time signature of Charging Cavalry, but you can still hear Spirit of Justice bright as day. So cool. Alright, so what comes after the galloping? Well, where we last left off, we had upped the tension with the galloping, but we're nowhere near done, because while galloping is an exciting start, human war cries are another thing entirely. And yes, there is a section where I'm supposed to simulate human war cries. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the piece. You can just let loose and tremolo using not only the bow hair, but also the bow stick. But now, this kind of poses a problem. What part of Spear of Justice do we pair this part of the story with? I tried at first to use this part of Spear of Justice, but there was still a bit of a mismatch, not in any music theory way, but more of in an overall story way. After some research, I found this great article by Jason Yu showing how the part I had tried to use was from a part of the waterfall theme, which in turn came from the ruins theme. Looking at those two themes, I realized that while powerful, their stories were still not quite climactic enough. After all, those are themes from the beginning of the game, not the climax. I racked my brain trying to think of how to find a part of the story of Undyne that could match the battle cries of Charging Cavalry. I needed something that depicted Undyne's stretched to her limits, doing anything it takes to defend her homeland. Oh, dang nabbit. Yeah, so I was a dum-dum and forgot that Undyne has an entirely different theme for her arc in Undertale's No Mercy or run, which is when she literally refuses to die in order to protect everyone, humans and monsters alike. Okay, so I finally found an awesome part of Undyne's story to fuse with the battle cries of Charging Cavalry. Let's add them. One cool thing that I was able to do was incorporate the sound of the punch that nearly kills Undyne into the fusion as a sudden stop that nearly strikes down the momentum of the previous movement. Then with the fury of a last stand, we bring in Battle of a True Hero, accompanied by the war cries of Charging Cavalry. Add a build-up, a key change, whatever we need to really amplify the tension of this section. Just gotta finish up the story of Charging Cavalry, and the skeleton of this hypothetical fusion will be done. After the war cries wrap up, we have an intense repeat of that combat melody from before, and as it builds up, our cavalrymen are finally victorious, and we loop back to that majestic theme from the very beginning. One last big build-up, and honest to goodness horse neigh. And yes, there's literally a section where I'm supposed to simulate a horse neigh. I've played Erhu for years, and that is still just as cool as when I first learned it. And we are victorious. That majestic, chest-filling camaraderie that got us started on this adventure is what finishes it up. And after a victorious battle, the homeland is safe. Now, hang on just a minute. Let's recap the story of that piece real quick. We have a majestic melody that starts off with a bang, symbolizing a story of protecting one's homeland from invaders. The story gets slightly more intense and stressful with a new melody that shows the conflicts along the way, and we have another melody showing a sort of epic camaraderie before looping back to the intense conflict theme from the beginning, and then building up one last time to a triumphant end. Everyone, that's Undyne's story. We have a majestic melody that starts off with a bang, symbolizing a story of protecting one's homeland, the underground, from invading humans. The story gets slightly more intense and stressful with a new melody that shows the conflicts along the way, and we have another melody showing a sort of epic camaraderie along with increased climactic tension with the help of the Battle of a True Hero theme, before looping back to the intense conflict theme from the beginning, and then building up one last time to a triumphant end. Yes, there's not much of a similarity in terms of genre or key signature, timing, or anything like that, but by golly, the fact that this Erhu classic from 1976 shares the same musical story as the theme for Undyne from Undertale in 2015, that is just amazing. Now, that begs the question. Does it sound good? Is that human sense of heroism and adventure preserved in the music? This project was mainly a proof of concept, so I've yet to fully record with my Erhu or compose any accompaniments, but I'll go ahead and play a digital piano simulation of the piece in the background so you can get a taste of it as I go over some interesting conclusions, final points, that sort of stuff. Alright, so first things first, I'm so relieved that I stuck with numerical music notation. This fusion had the most key changes out of any of my compositions, and I am light years away from being any expert composer, so had I used staff music, I would have gotten lost after the first few measures. Another big thing is that while Spear of Justice and Charging Cavalry did have similar stories and emotional contexts, I actually had to bring in Battle of a True Hero in order to properly match the hype and tension of the climax of Charging Cavalry. In a way though, I'm glad it did, because I was able to get a fuller picture of Undyne's story that way, really getting a chance to simply show off how she can get so determined to protect her homeland that she will literally melt before giving up. I mean, that level of perseverance is simply timeless. As I continue to flesh out this fusion of pieces, my hope is to smooth out the transitions and the time signatures by adding some well-timed percussion. I've also added a place for the hit sound effect that nearly kills Undyne, so I'm curious to see how that'll sound when used with the Erhu, Yangqin, Guzheng, and any other instruments I end up adding in the end. Lastly, you may have noticed that there are some Erhu sounds in the preview, and that's no mistake. I mainly wanted to see how the sound effects might sound with the hypothetical melodies, and since there wasn't any easy way to simulate it, I just added some quick clips to act as placeholders. Gotta say, I'm really excited to see how I can flesh this out now that I know this fusion is actually possible. In the end, despite the technical differences, I feel that the two pieces are able to jive together. Sure, it's a cavalry in 1976 and an anthropomorphic fish in a 2015 video game, but you know what? The stories are the same, the emotions are that same human feeling of heroism, survival, and adventure, and that's something that I'm very, very happy to have examined here today. However, I'm far from done with this fusion. This video format is somewhat different from the music videos that I typically stick to, but one advantage of doing this is that I can get suggestions from all of you. I'm really excited to do what I can and flesh this out into a full-on Erhu cover, so if you have any ideas for that process, please leave a comment on this video, and it just might help make the piece even better. Until then, you might like other videos on Erhu for all, like this Erhu rendition of Blinding Lights, so feel free to take a look. With that, I'm excited to see what you think of this new type of video, and I hope you're well wherever you are. Bye.